Hello there again. This is show 7. Yeah, 7. The next couple shows we're going to be doing on the tool chest trays. I think I mentioned that last time. So it's going to take a whole 2 shows to do these trays because there's a lot that has to be done. So we'll get right to it, but before we get right to it, you remember last time we talked about the possibility of Jonine giving us a little tour of her workshop. Well, we got the green light on the show, and we're going to be doing that. Not on this show, but the very next show. We're going to get a tour. Jonine's going to be on camera, and she's going to show us her workshop. So stay tuned for that. We will be doing that. So that'll be a lot of fun. Okay. As you remember last time, I'll just put this up. Here's the tool chest. And I talked about the tray. Made a little foam core tray here so you can see what it's going to look like. Now I have a surprise for you. Since we're making 2 trays, I went ahead and made 1. And here it is. So the drawer runners still are just taped in right now. I'll work on that in a bit. But here's the tray. And this is what it looks like. Rather dainty dovetails here, as you can see. 1/4 inch stock. This is poplar. And then the bottom is a panel. Has a groove along the bottom here that fits into the rabbet here around the bottom panel fits into the groove. So it's very traditional design, very simple. And then all I did was I glued a couple pieces of wood in here. You can see them here, just to give me something to lift the tray out with, make it a little bit easier to lift. So that's it, and it works pretty good. The second tray is going to be exactly like this one, but it's going to be a 1/2 inch shorter in length because it has to clear these runners and slide underneath the one above it. So it will be just like this one, same dimensions, but just a little bit shorter by 1/2 inch. So that's the idea. All we have to do is do it again. So, let us get started. I had to rip the stock and plane it to size. You've seen that before. So we've got a couple quick shots of me doing that, planing it and cutting it down to size and so forth. What we wind up with then are the pieces that I need for the tray. And here they are. Now I've gone ahead and actually cut the dovetails into one end, and then I'm going to leapfrog ahead. Just made the cuts, I didn't actually cut them out, just made the saw cuts. And now I'm going to do the same thing on this end here. That's the first step. Maybe what I should do is show you a dovetail. This is the first dovetail I made about 5 years ago. It's practice. But it's actually 2 different halves. You have this half here, which contains the dovetail. You can see the dovetail look to it there, the taper. And then the piece it fits into has negative space cut into it that the dovetails fit into. And that goes, I think, let's see if I do this right. That will go like this. And then it goes together. This piece here is called the tail board. These pieces here are called the pins, and this is called the pin board. So together they make a fantastically strong joint, and with a little glue it stays together. So that's what we're going to try to do in miniature with this one. So the first step is to set my gauge line, what we call a gauge line. And I have my gauge set up for it. And what I want to do is scribe a line along the bottom of this, along the end of each piece. So I'll do that now and show you how that goes. This is set, it's got a razor sharp wheel on the end. This is already set, so it is set for the thickness of the stock we're using. Actually, it's set for this thickness minus a little bit. I'll explain about that later, but let's just say it's set for the thickness of the stock for now. Now I'm going to go ahead and scribe it. I think I need my glasses. Do I have them? Okay, hang on here. We're kind of doing this on the fly, you know. So, okay, here we go. So that gives me a scratch mark, which is very accurate, and I can use that for my reference when I saw it. And chisel it. Okay, to save time, what I'm going to do is stack these and cut them straight across with my saw stacked. So what happens is I'll be making 2 cuts at a time, 1 for each piece, simultaneously. Pardon my back. Those are clamped together. Now I need to lay out my dovetails. And I have to space out my dovetails. Now there's a lot of ways to do that, but one way to avoid a lot of measuring is to use a pair of dividers. This is a little tiny pair of dividers. I've got them in different sizes. They have sharp points, and I have this one already set just to save time, but this will help me space out where the dovetails go because you want them to be nicely spaced out. So what I do, I'm going to walk this across. Can you see? Is the light working here? Okay.
I think so.
I've walked it across. Now I'm going to move it over. Go back the other way. Okay. Now it gives us 2 little snake bites, 2 little pairs of points. And now I'm going to connect them. What I need to do is draw lines for sawing for the dovetails. Now there's a dovetail. Notice it has a taper on it, of course. That makes it a dovetail. How do I draw that taper? How do I get that taper on there? Well, the traditional way would be to draw a slope and set this thing called a sliding bevel gauge on it. Now I've taken this board and marked it. I've measured 1 inch over from the end, and then I've measured up here 4 inches, 5 inches, 6 inches, and 8 inches to set different bevels that I might want to work with. So this would be a 1 inch and 4 inch bevel, or 1 and 4. This is a 1 and 5. This is a 1 and 6. You can see they have different degrees of slope. So all I need to do, if I decide to go with a 1 and 6, and that's what I'm using today, I take my bevel, I set it for the 6th slope, that's right there, and I slide it down there like that and lock it off. Now that's set for 1 and 6. That gives me a 1 and 6 slope. Now this is pretty big. You can use a little one, not dainty. Or you can use something called a dovetail marker, which has, this one has a 1 and 6 slope already built into it. And I'm going to use that today because it's my new toy. So, let's see if we get this I'm going to put this.
Let's see.
Can you see?
Mm-hmm.
Whew, okay. So now I've got my dovetails marked here. Can you see that?
Oh yeah.
And then like that. Okay. Now I have to saw very carefully. Usually I would use my dovetail saw, but the teeth on this I find are for small stock, or it's just a little bit too coarse. And I kind of got a liking to this. This is called a Zona saw. It's only about $14, I think. Real tiny teeth, real narrow saw plate, makes really precise cuts. And I think it works better for small stock like this. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay. Now I got my cuts. I'm not the most skillful saw guy in the world, but that'll work. Okay. Now I need to cut this groove. I've done it on this piece here. I'm going to cut it. You can see there. You do the same thing on this piece. So this ain't easy in front of an audience. You know that? Okay. You'll see in a minute how it works. This is called a plow plane. It's kind of neat. It has a fence on it to control how far over I cut the groove. It has a tiny little blade on here which cuts the groove, and a depth stop which prevents me from going past the depth that I want to go to. I put this little blue tape. If you're wondering what that is, I'm just shimming with that. I found that this depth works if I have that little shim on there. So anyway, here we go. I start at the end because it prevents the blade from wandering and following the grain. So here we go. I move back a little bit each time. See the curly cues that come off of there. Notice it's bottoming out towards the end. It's no longer cutting. Because the depth stop is controlling, so it can't go any further, and that way I get a groove that is just the right depth. As you can see, it's just the right width in. More noise, sorry about that. So now I've got my groove in the board. I've got my saw marks, saw cuts for the dovetail. And now I need to proceed with cutting these out with the chisel. This is chisel work at this point, and that's to cut out my dovetails. We can dissolve. Whoa, where did the time go? We try to keep our show at 15 minutes or under, and I'm sure we've blown past that point. So we'll catch you next time. We're going to do 2 more shows on this topic, because we have a lot to cover. So catch you next time. Whoa, where did the time go?
I think.
Whoa, where did the time go?
Ken.
All
Try
right.
a different
Hang on,
sense.
hang on, hang on. All right. All right. Okay, just keep rolling. Whoa, where did the time go? Well, where... Okay, that's it.
I started to laugh.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Give it to me with a different emphasis.
Whoa, where'd the time go?
Where did the time go?
Where did the time go? Where did the time go? Or how about where did the time go? Or where did the time go? Or where did the time go?